Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. South African politicians are going bat crap crazy, blaming America for intruding in South Africa's internal affairs, interfering in South Africa, dictating, being imperialistic, telling South Africa what to do. Don't know what dimension these people are living in, but the United States isn't doing anything of the sort. Donald Trump is disengaging from South Africa because of a number of egregious offenses against the United States' national interest. And people want to attribute this to Elon Musk. It's all Elon's fault. He's bumhurt about South Africa. Or the most ludicrous one, he misses apartheid. No, he was 18. He didn't have anything to do with apartheid. 18 when he left. Or all the other stuff. It's AfriForum's fault. Look at AfriForum. Years ago, they went to D.C. and Trump made a tweet. Oh, that's why it happened. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not that.
Welcome back once again. This is Chris Report, and he assured me that since I'm in town in Boulders, folks, this is Chris Wyatt reporting from South Africa.
South Africa's ANC has been insulting America and undermining our international interest for years. And finally, the chickens have come home to roost. First off, you have a lot of firebrands, including the EFF and Gwede Mantashe, the minerals minister, claiming that South Africa doesn't need America. Mantashe, if they won't give us the money, we won't give them the minerals. Well, Gwede, we buy the minerals, $430 million worth of them. So if you don't want to sell them to us, that's your problem. You deal with the mine closures where people aren't buying the minerals. That's your issue. Yeah. So what's really going on here? Well, this is a lot of bluster and empty nonsense because there's nothing behind it. Let's talk about what the United States does, just a small sampling of what the United States does that benefits South Africa. And then we're also going to talk about a small list of some of the most egregious offenses against our national security interest and against good order and discipline of the world community. So let's start with what the United States has been doing for South Africa. Well, South Africa gets support from the United States in international fora like the G20, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, places where they get money, resources, and trade advantages. We have been backing South Africa every time they wanted something there. The United States and South Africa share a $20 billion average annual two-way trade. Folks, that's over 5% of South Africa's gross domestic product. So you don't need the USA? So much for GDP growth. You just lost 5% of your economy at a minimum. That doesn't even take into account the 600 American companies that have headquarters that are based for their Africa operations in South Africa. The United States is the second largest trading partner with South Africa, and South Africa has a trade surplus, unlike with China, which runs a trade surplus with South Africa. So the South Africans have a massive deficit on trade with China, but they have a surplus with the U.S. Traditionally, the United States has long been South Africa's largest trading partner until about 2014 when China surpassed the U.S. because of its rapacious need for minerals. 63% of South Africa's mineral exports go to China. Duty-free access to the United States market via the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. That's about $3 billion a year in goods shipped to America with no duty. By contrast, we charge friendly European nations 2.5% for most of their goods or more, depending on what it is. South Africa gets access to the marketplace based on a list of requirements that the U.S. asks for those who participate in to adhere to voluntarily. One of them is respect for private property rights. By introducing the Expropriation Without Compensation Bill in 2018, South Africa abrogated its accession to the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. So it should have been kicked out a long time ago. United States buys $430 million a year in South African minerals, 4% of your total exports. From 2003 to 2025, the United States has donated $8.1 billion for the President's Emergency Program for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. Notice I said emergency program, not the enduring program. This program began in 2003 under the Bush administration. It was meant to be an immediate intervention in a crisis black swan event. $3 billion a year for 5 years, $15 billion. 85% of that money goes to the continent of Africa. By the way, that $15 billion wound up being over $43 billion, close to $45 billion spent on HIV, most of it in Africa. The idea was for African countries to get immediate help so that they could come up with the resources and deal with this on their own. 5 years. Well, Congress loves PEPFAR. It's now 22 years old. We've spent over $130 billion fighting HIV around the world. And for what? To be crapped on by South African politicians, to be insulted by South African politicians, To have them lie about what contribution the United States does when it's convenient for them and then claim they need it when it's inconvenient for them? Yeah, $8.1 billion. $8.1 billion. And the idea was for South Africa to wean itself off that aid. Why is it 17 years after the program was originally supposed to end that South Africa is screaming about money that Trump is turning off? United States donates an average of $500 million a year, including that PEPFAR money, gifted in foreign aid with no strings attached, no request for anything to South Africa. And so what do we get for all our troubles? These are just a small list of the things the United States does to help South Africa and South Africans. By the way, that money, all that aid doesn't go to the government of South Africa. It goes to third parties, companies, NGOs, third-party providers who provide goods and services in South Africa. We pay them, not the government. So the money didn't go to the hands of the ANC. But what do we get for all our trouble? What do we get? Well, here's a small sampling, ladies and gentlemen, of what we get. Over a tiff regarding poultry imports, because the United States poultry producers noticed a marketplace they had ignored. Americans don't eat chicken feet, but South Africans do. So instead of destroying or grinding it up for meal, they started shipping chicken parts to South Africa. The market was open. Because the inefficiency and the small size of South African poultry producers compared to the massive industrial poultry operations here in America, even with packaging and shipping it across the Atlantic, it was still cheaper for our poultry producers to make a profit selling it in South Africa, which made a challenge for South Africa's poultry industry. So what did South Africa do? They imposed a 75% tariff on our poultry imports. 75%. We didn't retaliate. And most of your goods and services come in the country with no duty on them. They also abstained and refused to condemn Russia for its illegal invasion of Ukraine, standing out in stark contrast to most of the world. That was in the United Nations. Then we have Cyril Ramaphosa's vaccine apartheid slander against the United States and the West. In a race-hustling narrative meant to slander and destroy the reputation of the West and scream for free handouts. And what's this all about? Well, South Africa has a domestic pharmaceutical industry, includes Aspen Pharmacare, one of the largest generic drug manufacturers in the world. They're perfectly capable of participating in a drug trial, but they didn't. South Africa didn't join the effort with the United States and British companies to develop vaccines against COVID, instead choosing to join the UN's failed COVAX scheme. And what happened was they were unable to secure supplies and didn't deliver them. So Ramaphosa went on a tour everywhere he went, opening his mouth, including the United States, and screaming and railing about vaccine apartheid. There was no vaccine apartheid. We developed these drugs in the private sector at the cost of tens of billions of dollars. We took the risk. The guinea pigs were Americans and Brits, overwhelmingly white, by the way, who were tested for these jabs. And then we brought it to market. You chose to sign it with the UN and not participate and get yourself in on the ground floor. And then you run around saying it's racist. The only racist thing there was the garbage coming out of Cyril Ramaphosa's mouth. Does he actually think that America is not insulted and has forgotten that? The African National Congress is also cozy with a designated terrorist group known as Hamas. In fact, when Hamas invaded Israel and murdered over 1,200 people and took hostages on October 7th, 2023, not only did they refuse to condemn Hamas, but Naledi Pandor had a telephone call and congratulated them on their attack. And then, in the hours after the attack, the ANC had the audacity to blame Israel for the terror attack committed by Hamas. Israel is a close friend and ally of the United States. South Africa's ANC also hosted a sanctioned Russian cargo ship known as the Lady R, ignoring polite, discreet diplomatic overtures from our embassy in Hatfield to find out what was going on. The ANC ignored us, rebuffed us for 5 months. Now they claim that it was impolite of Trump not to send a message that we were going to withdraw financial aid. Well, it was impolite of you to allow a sanctioned Russian ship to dock in the dark of night and offload containers, and all we did was politely ask instead of embarrassing you for 5 months. 5 months. And they ignored us until Ruben Briggity, our ambassador, went to the press, and suddenly they were interested. Another insult. South Africa held a naval exercise, the Chinese Communist Party, and the sanctioned Russian Navy, Operation Mosi 2, from the 17th to the 27th of February, 2023. South Africa's ANC has anti-American ties with Moscow, Beijing, and Havana. South Africa is actively trying to undermine the United States currency with its BRICS currency proposal. Ramaphosa's populist attacks on Trump in 2018, who could forget? He can keep his America, we'll keep our South Africa. Attacking and insulting President Trump and then berating him with Christian Amanpour at the United Nations. Mr. Trump, you do not act this way. Treat other countries with respect. Really? Hello, pot. This is kettle. You're black. Talk about lack of respect. Trump hasn't forgotten that, nor have we. South Africa recently joined 83 other countries in attacking the United States over President Trump's sanctions on the International Criminal Court. Why? This is after the United States announced it was suspending financial assistance to South Africa. Why would you poke the bear? Why would you antagonize Trump? Why would you make such a stupid decision? The United States is not even a signatory to the Rome Statute. So what's your problem? The members of the Rome Statute in the International Criminal Court operate from The Hague in Europe. They don't come to the United States. What's the problem? Going back a little further in history, South Africa also refused to sign an Article 98 waiver, which is a waiver for the Rome Statute, which is a promise from, and it's in the statute, that countries will not seek to extradite nationals from the United States for allegations related to the ICC. They refuse. And for the past year, the ANC has demanded that Taipei remove its diplomatic mission from Hatfield and downsize and move it to Johannesburg as a trade hub. That's it. Wow. Look how they're disrespecting Taiwan, one of our dear friends. South Africa also has violated the Vienna Convention, charging diplomatic and military aircraft on official business aircraft fees. That's through the airports company in South Africa. And they pretend that, well, it's not a government-run operation. It is. It's a parastatal. And they charge us fees. That's unheard of diplomatically. South Africa is also a hub for money laundering and terror financing. That's the reason why it's gray listed. Again, acting against the United States' interests. South Africa also authorized a sanctioned Russian military cargo plane to land at Waterkloof in South Africa during the conflict in Ukraine. And perhaps one of the most egregious of all these things, South Africa recruited former United States and NATO combat pilots to train the People's Liberation Army at the Test Flying Academy of South Africa. Wow. Do you think that's in our interest? And you want us to give you money? You should have free access to our marketplace when you charge us tariffs? Unbelievable. And finally, by the way, this is far from a complete list, folks. Last year, in February of 2024, a bipartisan congressional team put together a bill that would require the president to review AGOA status and to do a comprehensive review of the bilateral relationship. This is not coming from Elon Musk. This is not coming from AfriForum. And it is coming from Trump, but that's not the origin of it. The origin of it is the anger in Congress, the bipartisan anger at the two-faced behavior of the African National Congress. We are a paragon of democracy and human rights. We are filing a case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. I hadn't even mentioned that till now because of genocide. But where was the African National Congress when the Gambia went to the ICJ to start the concept of filing a state genocide case against Myanmar for its treatment of the Rohingya? They didn't participate. Not even an amicus brief to be friend of the court. Nothing. Silent. Where was the ANC in the genocide in Darfur? Silent. Where was the ANC on the genocide in Rwanda right after they came in office in 1994? Well, not only were they not really vocal, but they also housed the genocideers, which caused tensions with Rwanda to this day. Where was the ANC on the genocide in South Sudan? Silence, once again. Yeah, silent or complicit. The ANC says one thing and does something completely opposite. And now they insult our intelligence and your intelligence, trying to tell us that the expropriation without compensation bill is not about no payment. That nil doesn't mean no payment. It doesn't mean what? Nil, look it up in the dictionary, means zero, nothing, niet, nada, nine in the Bahnhof, nothing. Unbelievable. So if you're wondering why America has suspended gifted money, which isn't your money, South Africa, and why Trump has offered refugee status to some South Africans, this is just the beginning. And this addresses the portion about what they've done to harm United States interests. And it's a small selection. There are many more, but I'm not going to spend 3 hours detailing it. We have not intruded in South Africa's politics. We're not demanding anything from South Africa. We're simply saying that you don't get $500 million when you spit in our eye. We're done getting spit in the eye. So there you have it, folks. The truth, the unvarnished truth about what's really happening. While South African politicians rail in Parliament, call American names and demand this and demand that and say, hey, how they can go without the United States, go ahead. More power to you. lose hundreds of thousands of jobs because of your arrogance and asshattery. That's on you, politicians in South Africa. But that is, unfortunately, very sad for South Africans. If you actually care about South Africans, stop the nonsense, act more humble, and clean up your act, and quit acting against United States interests. Because it's not your money, and you're not entitled to it. Go well, folks. Be safe out there. Cheers.